"I want a child, but not with you," said the Millionaire CEO. 2 years later, he saw her again and couldn't walk away. A powerful story for my loyal, greatest, and best family. Let's begin with love. Jackson Dean didn't believe in consequences, only in choices other people made for him. The conference room smelled like leather and ambition. 14 executives sat around a table made from a single slab of walnut, each one waiting for Jackson to speak. He didn't. Silence was a weapon he'd sharpened over the years, and he wielded it now, watching them squirm. "Gentlemen," Jackson finally said, leaning back in his chair with the ease of someone who'd never been told no, "you're approaching this wrong." The head of operations opened his mouth, but a voice cut through first. "Actually, you're approaching this wrong." Every head turned. A woman stood near the back wall, her posture relaxed, but her eyes sharp. She wore a simple black suit that somehow made everyone else look overdressed. Jennifer Dawn, the crisis consultant his board had hired without asking him. Jackson raised an eyebrow. "Excuse me." You're treating a human problem like a mechanical one," Jennifer said, moving toward the table with measured steps. "You can't fix reputation damage by throwing lawyers at it. People don't trust corporations. They trust authenticity. And you're an expert on authenticity?" Jackson asked, his tone carrying just enough edge to make the room tense. "I'm an expert on what happens when powerful men think they're immune to consequences," Jennifer replied, meeting his gaze without flinching. "Which, from where I'm standing, is exactly your problem." The room went silent. No one spoke to Jackson Dean like that. No one dared. Jackson studied her. Most people looked away when he stared too long. She didn't. She just waited, like she had all day and nothing to lose. "Everyone out," Jackson said quietly. The executives scrambled to leave, grateful for the escape. Jennifer remained where she was, unfazed. She wasn't technically his employee, just a consultant the board had brought in, which apparently gave her the freedom to stay when dismissed staff wouldn't dare. When the door clicked shut, Jackson stood. "You're either very brave or very stupid." "I'm expensive," Jennifer said, "which means I don't waste time on flattery." Despite himself, Jackson smiled. "Fair enough. Tell me what I'm doing wrong, besides trying to intimidate me." "Besides that," Jennifer walked to the windows overlooking the city. "You think power protects you. It doesn't. It isolates you. And right now, you're so isolated you can't see that your company is bleeding trust because you treat people like variables in an equation." Jackson moved to stand beside her. Up close, he could see the small scar above her left eyebrow, the way her jaw tensed when she spoke. "You don't pull punches. I don't get paid to. What do you get paid to do?" She turned to face him fully. "Save men like you from yourselves." Something in her voice, not pity, not judgment, just truth, cracked something open in Jackson's chest. He'd spent years building walls, and she'd found a weakness in 3 sentences. "Have dinner with me?" he said. "No." "Why not?" "Because you're not asking for dinner. You're asking for control." Jackson blinked. She was right. Every invitation he'd ever extended was a test, a transaction, a way to measure his influence. "What if I just wanted to talk?" "Then you'd be lying," Jennifer said, but her expression softened slightly. "Look, Mr. Dean, Jackson." "Jackson," she corrected, "I'm here to fix your company's image, not to be another story people whisper about." "I wasn't suggesting—" "Yes, you were." She picked up her folder from the table. "I'll have a strategy proposal on your desk by tomorrow. Try to read it with an open mind." She was halfway to the door when Jackson spoke again. "What if I said I don't usually ask twice?" Jennifer paused, hand on the doorknob. "Then I'd say you should practice. It builds character." The door closed behind her, and Jackson stood alone in the conference room, feeling something he hadn't felt in years: curiosity. Over the following weeks, Jennifer became a constant presence. She sat in on meetings, challenged decisions, and refused every attempt Jackson made to charm her. It was infuriating. It was fascinating. He started finding excuses to work late, knowing she'd be there, poring over reports in the glass-walled office his board had assigned her. Sometimes he'd stand outside, watching her work, trying to understand what made her different from everyone else who orbited his world. She caught him watching one evening, looked up from her laptop, and raised an eyebrow. Jackson had the decency to look embarrassed before walking away. The next night, she left her office door open. An invitation, maybe, or a challenge. Jackson accepted it as both. One night, well past midnight, he knocked on her door. Jennifer looked up from her laptop, unsurprised. "Let me guess, you can't sleep." "How'd you know?" "Because you're standing outside my office at midnight instead of being home." Jackson stepped inside without invitation. "Do you ever stop working?" "Do you?" "Touché." He sat in the chair across from her desk. "Can I ask you something?" Jennifer closed her laptop, giving him her full attention. "That depends on the question. Why aren't you afraid of me?" She considered this, her expression thoughtful. "Because fear and respect aren't the same thing. You want people to fear you because it's easier than earning their respect. That's not an answer." "Yes, it is." Jennifer leaned back in her chair. "You're not scary, Jackson. You're lonely, and lonely people lash out because they don't know how to reach out." The words hit like a physical blow. Jackson had spent years perfecting his armor, and she'd just pointed out every crack. "I'm not lonely," he said, but the lie tasted bitter. "Okay." "I'm not." I said, "Okay." Jackson ran a hand through his hair, frustrated. "Why do you do that?" "Do what?" "Agree without agreeing. It's maddening." Jennifer smiled for the first time since he'd met her. "Good. You need more madness in your life." They sat in silence for a moment, the city lights glittering through the windows behind her. "When did you stop being a person and become a brand?" Jennifer asked softly. The question gutted him, because he knew the exact moment. He knew the day he'd decided feelings were liabilities and relationships were strategic moves. He knew when he'd stopped being Jackson and became Jackson Dean. "I don't know," he lied. "Liar." He laughed, sharp and bitter. "You're relentless. You're deflecting." Jackson met her eyes. "What do you want from me, Jennifer?" "Nothing," she said simply. "I don't want anything from you." "That's why you can't figure me out." She was right. Every person in his life wanted something: money, access, proximity to power. Jennifer just wanted him to be better. "What if I want something from you?" he asked. "Like what?" "I don't know yet." Jennifer stood, gathering her things. "Well, when you figure it out, let me know. I'm going home." "Wait." Jackson stood too, moving closer. "Stay just a little longer." "Why?" "Because I don't want to be alone right now." The honesty surprised them both. Jennifer's expression softened, and she set her bag down. "Okay," she said, "but we're just talking." They talked until dawn broke over the city. About everything and nothing. About the parents who'd never understood him and the sister she'd lost too young. About fear disguised as ambition and dreams abandoned for survival. About the small scars that shaped people and the large wounds they learned to hide. Jackson found himself telling her things he'd never told anyone, not his therapist, not his friends, not the women who'd passed through his life leaving no mark. He told her about the fear of being ordinary, of building an empire, and feeling emptier with each floor added to his tower. Jennifer listened without trying to fix him, without offering platitudes or solutions. She just heard him, really heard him. And somehow that was more valuable than anything else she could have given. "You're good at this," Jackson said as the sky lightened from black to purple to pink. "At what?" "Making people feel less alone." Jennifer's expression turned sad. "That's because I know what alone feels like." "You seem so confident, so sure of yourself." "Confidence and loneliness aren't mutually exclusive," Jennifer said. "You can be good at your job and still go home to an empty apartment. You can have all your shit together and still wish someone cared enough to ask how your day was." "How was your day?" Jackson asked. Jennifer smiled, genuine and warm. "Better now." Somewhere around sunrise, the conversation stopped being words and became something else. A touch on the shoulder, a hand on a hand, a moment where the world outside the windows ceased to exist. Jackson kissed her softly, expecting her to pull away. She didn't. "This is a bad idea," Jennifer whispered against his mouth. "Probably. I don't do casual." "I know." They moved to the leather couch, the city waking up around them. Two people who'd been alone so long they'd forgotten what it felt like to be seen. The connection between them was electric, honest, stripped of pretense. For once, Jackson wasn't performing. He was just present, vulnerable, real. Morning light streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows when Jennifer finally pulled back, her hair tangled, her suit wrinkled, her eyes holding his with an intensity that made his chest tight. "I want something real, Jackson," she said quietly. "Marriage one day, a child who knows us both. Not games, not transactions, real." Jackson's mouth opened, but the words that came out weren't his. They were the voice of every fear he'd ever protected himself with. "You're confusing intimacy with ownership." Chapter 2. The equation breaks. His mouth opened, but the wrong man answered. Jennifer's hands stilled on his chest. The warmth between them turned to ice so fast Jackson could feel it crystallizing in the air. "What did you say?" Her voice was level, dangerously calm. Jackson's brain screamed at him to stop, to take it back, to say anything else. But his pride, that vicious, wounded pride, had already taken control. "I'm Jackson Dean," he said, each word a nail in his own coffin. "You're someone who works in my building." The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full of every possibility dying in real time. Jennifer stood with a grace that made the moment worse. She didn't rush, didn't slam things around. She just began putting herself back together with methodical precision, buttoning her shirt, straightening her skirt, smoothing hair that his hands had tangled minutes ago. "Jennifer," Jackson started, his voice cracking on her name. "Don't." She held up one hand, still not looking at him. "Don't try to soften it now." "I didn't mean—" "Yes, you did." She finally met his eyes, and Jackson wished she hadn't. The hurt there was brief, a flash of lightning before the storm. What replaced it was worse, nothing. Absolute emptiness. "You meant every word. That's who you are when you're scared." "I'm not scared," she laughed, sharp and bitter. "You're terrified. Someone just offered you something real, and you reacted like a cornered animal. I'm not—" "Stop." Jennifer's voice cut through his protests. "Just stop. I'm not interested in watching you lie to yourself anymore." Jackson stood, reaching for her. "Let me explain." Jennifer stepped back, putting the desk between them. "There's nothing to explain." "I wasn't confused, Jackson." "You are." She picked up her bag, her laptop, the cardboard coffee cup from hours ago when the world had been different. Every movement was deliberate, final. "Where are you going?" "Away from here." "Away from you." "Jennifer, please. I told you I wanted something real," she said, her hand on the door handle. "And you told me I wasn't worth it." "Message received." "That's not what I said." "It's exactly what you said." She pulled the door open, paused without turning around. "I hope whatever you're protecting in that fortress of yours is worth it, because it looks pretty lonely from where I'm standing." The door closed with a soft click that echoed louder than a slam ever could. Jackson stood in the center of the room, surrounded by the evidence of what had just happened, the wrinkled couch cushions, the empty coffee cups, the lingering scent of her perfume. He waited for the relief to come, for the satisfaction of maintaining control, of protecting himself, of winning whatever twisted game his mind had convinced him they were playing. Nothing came, just a hollow ache in his chest that felt suspiciously like loss. He pulled out his phone, typed a message. "Can we talk?" He stared at it for 5 minutes before deleting it unsent. She'd told him exactly who she was and what she wanted. He'd told her exactly what he thought of both. What else was there to say? The days that followed felt wrong. Jackson couldn't name it, couldn't fix it, couldn't code his way out of it. He just knew that every room felt emptier, every conversation more exhausting, every moment more hollow. His assistant noticed first. "Are you feeling all right? You've been distracted." "I'm fine," Jackson said, staring at his computer screen without seeing it. "It's just that you've been sitting in this meeting for 20 minutes and haven't said a word." Jackson looked up, realizing with a start that there were 6 people around the conference table, all watching him with concern. "Apologies," he said, standing abruptly. "Something came up. Reschedule." He left them staring after him, confusion rippling through the room. In his office, Jackson pulled up the security system. He told himself he was checking protocols, verifying access logs, doing his job. But his fingers navigated to the cameras covering Jennifer's office with the precision of muscle memory. Her desk was empty. No laptop, no files, no coffee cups. Just bare wood and a vacant chair. Jackson's chest constricted. His assistant appeared in the doorway. "Sir, Ms. Dawn's resignation letter arrived this morning. She's requesting immediate release from her contract." "All? What reason did she give?" "Personal circumstances requiring relocation." "Relocation? Where?" She didn't specify. Jackson read the letter 17 times. It was professional, brief, completely devoid of emotion. It said nothing and everything at once. He approved it immediately, because making her stay would be another form of cruelty, and he'd already inflicted enough. Weeks bled into months. Jackson threw himself into work with a ferocity that impressed even his most ambitious colleagues. He acquired companies, launched initiatives, expanded territories. His net worth climbed, his influence spread, his empire grew, and he felt nothing. Late at night, alone in his penthouse, he'd catch himself reaching for his phone to text her before remembering she'd blocked his number. He'd see a woman with dark hair across a restaurant, and his heart would lurch before he realized it wasn't her. His friends, the few he had, stopped inviting him to gatherings. Not because he was difficult, but because his presence was like a black hole, sucking the energy from every room. "You're different," one of them said after a particularly silent dinner, "ever since that consultant left." "I'm the same," Jackson insisted. "No, you're not. You used to be arrogant. Now you're just hollow." Jackson wanted to argue, but the words wouldn't come. Because it was true. He'd spent years building walls to protect himself, and now he was trapped inside them, watching life happen through bulletproof glass. One evening, his security chief mentioned casually that Jennifer had been seen at a charity function across the country. She'd started her own firm. It was thriving. Jackson pulled up photos from the event on his tablet. There she was, laughing with clients, shaking hands with sponsors, looking exactly like someone who'd moved on with her life. He zoomed in on her smile. It reached her eyes. She looked happy. He looked like a ghost. That night, Jackson stood at his windows until the city lights blurred. He didn't cry. He'd forgotten how. He just stood there, numb, wondering when he'd stop being human and started being this empty shell wearing expensive clothes. 3 months after Jennifer walked out of his life, Jackson sat alone in the conference room where they'd first met. The walnut table gleamed in the afternoon light. The leather chairs sat empty. The windows overlooked a city full of people who'd never know his name and wouldn't care if they did. He pulled up old security footage on his tablet, watched Jennifer walk through the lobby, into the elevator, down the hall, into his office. Watched her leave for the last time, her posture straight, her dignity intact. He didn't watch it again. Once was enough to understand that he'd destroyed something irreplaceable. Jackson closed the tablet and sat in the dark, surrounded by everything he'd built and nothing that mattered. Across the country, Jennifer Dawn stared at 2 pink lines. On a test, her hand trembling, not with fear but with resolve. Chapter 3. Parallel Processing. She chose the truth that scared her less. Raising a child alone was easier than raising one with a coward. Jennifer sat on the bathroom floor of her new apartment, back against the cold tile, test still in her hand. The sun was setting through the small window above the sink, painting everything in shades of amber and gold. She wasn't crying. That surprised her. She'd expected tears, panic, the overwhelming sense of being trapped that every movie and television show promised. Instead, she felt oddly calm, centered even. A child, his child, their child. No, her child. The distinction mattered. Jennifer had spent weeks after leaving Jackson's office, waiting for regret to find her, waiting to second-guess her decision, to walk away from a man who clearly needed her more than he'd ever admit. Waiting for the pull of love to drag her back. It never came, because what she'd felt for Jackson hadn't been love, not yet. It had been potential, possibility, the ghost of what they could have been if he'd been braver. But he wasn't brave, and she wasn't interested in raising 2 children. Jennifer stood, catching her reflection in the mirror. She looked the same dark eyes, same sharp cheekbones, same woman who'd walked out of a penthouse office with her dignity intact. But something was different now. Something fundamental had shifted. She was going to be someone's mother. The thought terrified and thrilled her in equal measure. Over the following weeks, Jennifer built a fortress of her own, not made of money or power, but of decisions. She told no one about Jackson, listed no father on preliminary medical forms, created a story so simple it was almost true. She'd wanted a child, chosen to have one, and was doing this alone. People asked questions with their eyes more than their mouths. Jennifer answered with a smile that didn't invite follow-up. Her doctor, a kind woman with grey streaks in her hair, asked gently during the first appointment, "Is the father involved?" "No," Jennifer said, "and he won't be." The doctor nodded, made a note, moved on. No judgment, no pity, just acceptance. Jennifer was grateful for the simplicity of it. She threw herself into preparation with the same intensity she'd once applied to saving failing companies. Read every book, took every class, joined online. Groups where other women shared their fears and victories in the raw language of experience. At night, she'd sit in the nursery she was slowly assembling, a room that had been a storage closet in her previous life, and talk to the child growing inside her. "Your name is Amber," she'd whisper, hand on her belly. "Like the light right before darkness. Like the color of hope. You're going to be so loved, baby girl, so wanted. You'll never have to beg for someone's attention or wonder if you're worth their time." The promise felt sacred, unbreakable. Meanwhile, hundreds of miles away, Jackson Dean was becoming a ghost in his own life. His colleagues noticed the change first. The sharp wit dulled, the commanding presence faded. He still ran meetings, closed deals, made decisions that moved markets. But he did it all mechanically, like a machine executing code without understanding why. "You need a vacation," his assistant suggested after finding him asleep at his desk for the 3rd time that month. "I'm fine," Jackson said, though the shadows under his eyes suggested otherwise. "When's the last time you ate something that wasn't delivered?" Jackson couldn't remember. Food had become fuel, nothing more. Everything tasted like cardboard anyway. He started avoiding social situations entirely. Declined invitations to galas, fundraisers, the kind of events he'd once used to expand his network. The very thought of small talk, of pretending to be interested in people he didn't care about, exhausted him. His penthouse, once a showpiece of minimalist design and commanding views, became a mausoleum. Jackson would stand at the windows for hours, watching the city lights flicker below, feeling nothing. One night his phone rang. An old friend, someone from before he'd become Jackson Dean, back when he was just Jackson trying to survive. "Hey man, we're all getting together next weekend, you should come." I can't, Jackson said automatically. You always say that. I'm busy. You're always busy. A pause. Look, I don't know what happened, but you're disappearing. And I don't mean from parties. I mean from everything, from yourself. Jackson wanted to argue, but the words wouldn't come, because it was true. He was disappearing, had been for months, fading away one declined invitation, one hollow victory, one empty night at a time. I'm fine, he finally managed. No, you're not, but I can't make you admit it. Just call me if you need to talk, okay? Okay. Jackson never called. He did, however, spend hours staring at nothing, sitting in empty rooms, existing without living. His board noticed his decline, called meetings without him, started making decisions that would have once required his approval. Jackson let them. What did it matter? Late one night, alone in his office, Jackson opened his laptop and typed Jennifer's name into a search engine, found her new company website, read her bio, looked at photos of her speaking at conferences, consulting with clients, building the life she deserved. She looked happy, successful, free. Jackson closed the laptop and put his head in his hands. Across the country, Jennifer gave birth to Amber on a Tuesday morning. There were complications, nothing life-threatening, but enough to make it harder, longer, more painful than the books had promised. Jennifer labored for 16 hours, alone, except for the nurses who rotated through with efficient kindness. When they finally placed Amber on her chest, tiny and wrinkled and screaming, Jennifer felt something inside her break open, not painfully, beautifully. "Hi, baby girl," she whispered, crying now, tears streaming down her face unchecked. "Hi, sweet girl. I've been waiting for you." Amber's cries softened. Her eyes, unfocused but searching, seemed to find Jennifer's face. Jennifer laughed through her tears, pressing her lips to Amber's forehead. "You'll never have to beg for love," Jennifer promised, the words sacred and fierce. "Never. You are wanted. You are chosen. You are mine." A nurse smiled from the corner, wiping at her own eyes. "She's beautiful. She's perfect," Jennifer corrected. Later, when the room was quiet and Amber was sleeping in the plastic bassinet beside the hospital bed, Jennifer took a photo. Just one. Amber's tiny hand curled against Jennifer's finger. She thought about sending it, thought about typing a message. "You have a daughter. Her name is Amber. She's perfect, and she'll never know you hurt me." Instead, Jennifer deleted the photo, held her daughter closer, and promised herself that Amber's story would never include a father who had to be convinced she was worth loving. Some truths were too important to dilute with complications. Jennifer Dawn had made her choice, and she would spend the rest of her life making sure Amber never regretted it. Chapter 4. Compound Decay. Years don't heal. They just give wounds time to settle into architecture. Amber learned to walk in the small apartment Jennifer had made into a home. She took her first steps between the coffee table and the couch, arms outstretched, face lit with triumph when Jennifer caught her. "That's my girl!" Jennifer laughed, scooping Amber up and spinning her around. "You're unstoppable!" Amber squealed with delight, the sound pure and bright, and Jennifer felt that familiar surge of fierce love that still sometimes caught her off guard. Life had a rhythm now. Morning routines and afternoon naps and bedtime stories. Jennifer had built a consulting practice from the ground up, working from home while Amber played nearby, learning to balance spreadsheets and snack time with the grace of necessity. Friends emerged from unexpected places. Other mothers at the park, neighbors who became family, a community that wrapped around Jennifer and Amber like protective arms. Peter Williams, a gentle giant of a man who'd made his fortune in renewable energy, became an unlikely mentor. He'd hired Jennifer to consult on a reputation crisis, stayed for her insight, and remained because he saw something in her that reminded him of his late wife, strength tempered with grace. "You're doing an incredible job," Peter said one afternoon, watching Amber stack blocks with intense concentration. "Some days I'm not so sure," Jennifer admitted. "That's how you know you're doing it right." Peter smiled. "The ones who think they have all the answers are the ones you should worry about." Jennifer appreciated Peter's presence in their lives. He was steady, kind, genuinely interested in Amber's development without any agenda beyond friendship. He sent thoughtful birthday gifts, showed up to preschool performances, offered advice when asked, and silence when needed. Amber, for her part, was becoming a force of nature. Stubborn, curious, wildly independent one moment and clingy the next. She had Jennifer's eyes but someone else's bone structure, the strong chin, the way her brow furrowed when she concentrated. Jennifer tried not to see Jackson in her daughter's face, mostly succeeded. "Mama, no daddy?" Amber asked one morning while Jennifer was braiding her hair. At barely 3, her sentences were simple, direct. Jennifer's hands stilled for just a second before continuing the familiar pattern. "Some families have mama and daddy, some have one, some have more. We have us. Is good?" Amber considered this with the seriousness she applied to everything. "Good. You best, Mama." Jennifer kissed the top of her head, blinking back tears. "And your best, Amber." The conversation didn't come up again. Amber was content with their world, small but full, simple but rich. Meanwhile, Jackson Dean was collapsing inward like a dying star. His empire continued to expand, but he'd become a figurehead in his own company. Board members made decisions, executives ran divisions. Jackson signed papers and attended meetings where his presence was required, but his input was optional. No one knew what to do with him. "He's not the same," his CFO said during a private conversation with the board. "Haven't been for years. He's not making bad decisions, he's just not making any decisions at all." "Should we be worried?" someone asked. "I don't know. He still shows up, still signs off on everything. He's just absent." Absent was the right word. Jackson moved through his days like a ghost haunting his own life. He woke up in the same penthouse, wore the same expensive clothes, drove the same luxury car. But none of it felt real anymore. The parties stopped inviting him after he attended. One stood in the corner for 2 hours without speaking to anyone before leaving without saying goodbye. The women who'd once pursued him gave up after he turned down advances with polite disinterest. The friends he'd accumulated through ambition gradually stopped calling. Jackson let it all slip away. What was the point of pretending? Late at night, he'd stand at his windows and wonder what Jennifer was doing, if she ever thought about him, if she'd found someone worthy of the love she'd offered him. The wondering ate at him, but not enough to make him do anything about it. Because what would he even say? "Sorry I destroyed the best thing in my life. Sorry I was too much of a coward to recognize what you were offering." Sorry seemed insufficient for the magnitude of his failure. So Jackson said nothing, did nothing, became nothing. His assistant, loyal despite everything, tried occasionally to pull him back. "There's a summit next month. National level. You've been invited to speak." Decline. "It would be good for the company." "Oh, someone else can go." "They specifically asked for you." They'll survive the disappointment. But the assistant was persistent, brought it up again a week later. The summit organizers called again. "They really want you there. Jennifer Dawn is speaking." Jackson's head snapped up. "What?" "Jennifer Dawn. She's giving a keynote on ethical leadership. I thought you might want to." "Accept the invitation," Jackson said, his voice rough from disuse. The assistant blinked, surprised. Really? Yes, whatever it takes, I'll be there. For the first time in years, Jackson felt something other than numbness. It wasn't hope. Hope required too much optimism. It was more like dread and anticipation twisted together, making his chest tight and his hands shake. He had no plan, no idea what he'd say if he saw her, no illusion that she'd want to speak to him, but he'd be there anyway, because the alternative, spending the rest of his life wondering, was finally worse than the fear of facing her. Jennifer received the summit invitation with mixed feelings. Part of her wanted to decline, to avoid any possibility of running into Jackson, but the larger part, the part that had built a life and a business and a future, refused to let fear dictate her choices. "I've earned this platform," she told Peter over coffee. "I'm not going to hide." "Good," Peter said, "but if you need backup, I'm happy to attend." "That would be helpful, actually. Amber could use a familiar face if I'm busy networking." Peter smiled. "I'd be honored." The night before leaving for the summit, Jennifer tucked Amber into bed in their apartment. Peter would drive them in the morning. He'd insisted it would be easier than flying with a toddler, and Jennifer had gratefully accepted. "Big day, Mama?" Amber asked sleepily, her words still slightly muddled. "That's right, baby." "Peter come?" "Yep. He's going to take you to see the aquarium while Mama works." Amber yawned, already drifting off. "Love you, Mama." "Love you more, sweet girl." Jennifer sat beside the bed long after Amber fell asleep, watching her daughter's chest rise and fall, feeling the weight of what tomorrow might bring. She didn't know Jackson would be there, had no reason to suspect their paths would cross. But somewhere deep in her chest, beneath the armor she'd built, a part of her wondered if she was ready to see him again, and whether she'd recognize the man who'd broken her heart, or if he'd become someone else entirely. Jennifer fell asleep with the question unanswered, not knowing that tomorrow would shatter the careful peace she'd built and force her to confront the one truth she'd been avoiding. Some wounds don't heal. They just wait for the right moment to reopen. Chapter 5. Collision Protocols. Fate isn't poetic, it's just poor planning meeting terrible timing. The morning started with rain. Not the gentle kind, but the angry sheets that turned highways into rivers and made visibility a luxury. Peter drove carefully, his hands steady on the wheel, while Jennifer sat in the passenger seat reviewing her keynote notes for the third time. "You're going to be brilliant," Peter said, glancing at her. "You know this material inside and out." "I know. I just want everything to be perfect." In the back seat, Amber was already asleep, her head lolled to one side, clutching the stuffed elephant she couldn't sleep without. Jennifer turned to check on her, felt that familiar surge of protective love. "She's fine," Peter said gently. "Relax." "I can't. What if something goes wrong? What if the childcare at the summit isn't good? What if she gets scared and I'm not there?" "Then I'll be there," Peter reminded her. "That's why you asked me to come, remember?" Jennifer managed to smile. "Thank you for all of this, for driving us, for helping with Amber, for being a friend," Peter finished, "which is exactly what I want to be. No pressure, no expectations. Just someone who shows up." The rain had stopped by the time they reached the summit venue, but the sky remained grey and threatening. Peter parked, helped Jennifer unload their bags, then scooped up a still-sleeping Amber with practiced ease. "I'll get her settled in the childcare room," he said. "You go check in and get ready for your moment." Jennifer watched them walk toward the entrance, Peter's broad back, Amber's small form nestled against his shoulder, and felt grateful for the chosen family she'd built. Inside, the summit venue buzzed with the kind of energy that came from putting powerful people in one room and telling them to network. Jennifer found the check-in desk, collected her speaker badge, and made her way backstage. "You're on in 20 minutes, a production assistant told her, handing over a bottle of water. "Wireless mic, no podium. You'll have the whole stage." "Perfect." Jennifer found a quiet corner to center herself, breathed slowly, reviewed her opening lines, reminded herself that she'd earned this moment through years of hard work, and no ghost from her past could take that away. When they called her name, she walked onto that stage like she owned it. The lights were bright enough that she couldn't see individual faces in the audience, just shapes, shadows, the vague impression of hundreds of people watching. Better that way. Less pressure. She began speaking, and within 30 seconds the nerves dissolved. This was her element. This was what she'd built her second life doing. Teaching people how to lead with integrity, how to balance power with humanity, how to see consequences before they became catastrophes. "Accountability isn't weakness," Jennifer said, her voice carrying through the hall. "It's the foundation of trust, and trust is the only currency that actually matters. You can buy loyalty, you can demand obedience, but you cannot purchase genuine trust. That has to be earned through consistency, honesty, and the willingness to admit when you're wrong." The audience was engaged, leaning forward, some taking notes. Jennifer found her rhythm, moving through her points with practiced ease. "The difference between power and integrity," she continued, "is what you do when no one's watching. When there's no board to impress, no shareholders to appease, no cameras recording your actions. That's when your true character shows. And that's what people remember." In the back row, Jackson Dean sat frozen, his entire world narrowing to the woman on stage. She looked different, stronger somehow, more solid. The uncertainty he'd glimpsed in those late-night conversations was gone, replaced by the kind of confidence that came from surviving something difficult and coming out the other side intact. He'd made a terrible mistake coming here. The certainty hit him like a physical blow. What had he been thinking? That she'd see him and everything would somehow be okay. Jackson stood, intending to leave before she saw him, but the movement caught attention. People turned, whispered. Someone near him said, "Is that Jackson Dean?" He sat back down, trapped by his own reputation. Jennifer finished her keynote to enthusiastic applause. She smiled, waved, exited stage left, feeling the familiar post-speech euphoria of a job well done. Peter met her in the green room, grinning. "You were phenomenal. The moderator wants to know if you're available for the closing panel tomorrow." "Really? That's wonderful." Jennifer set down her notes, took a long drink of water. "Where's Amber?" "The childcare room. She made a friend. They're building something elaborate with blocks." "Perfect. Give me 10 minutes to decompress, then I'll go get her. Take your time. I'll grab you something to eat from the reception." Jennifer nodded gratefully. Peter left, and she sat alone in the quiet room, letting the adrenaline drain away. The reception hall was chaos, hundreds of people mingling, drinking, networking, with the aggressive determination of professionals who measured success in business cards exchanged. Jackson moved through the crowd like a shark through water, staying on the periphery, scanning faces for the one he both needed and dreaded to see. Then he spotted her. Jennifer stood near the windows, laughing at something Peter Williams said, completely at ease. She looked happy, genuinely, radiantly happy. Jackson's chest constricted. She'd moved on, built a life, found someone better. Peter Williams, of course. Jackson knew him by reputation. Self-made billionaire, philanthropist, the kind of man who made money and used it to make the world better. Everything Jackson wasn't. Jealousy, sharp and irrational, cut through Jackson's numbness. He was halfway across the room before he realized he was moving, drawn to her like gravity, unable to stop himself, even though every logical part of his brain screamed that this was a terrible idea. Jennifer saw him the same moment he reached her. The smile dropped from her face, not slowly, instantaneously, like someone had flipped a switch. Peter noticed her expression change, followed her gaze, saw Jackson approaching. "Jennifer?" Peter said quietly, his body shifting into a protective stance. "It's fine," Jennifer said, though her voice was tight. "I can handle this." Jackson stopped a respectful distance away, suddenly aware that he had no plan, no speech prepared, no idea what to say. "Hello, Jennifer." Her expression was unreadable. "Jackson." Peter looked between them, understanding dawning. "You're him." "Peter, it's okay," Jennifer said. "I'll be right over there if you need me," Peter said, his tone making it clear that this was both a statement and a threat. When they were alone as you could be in a room full of people. Jackson tried to form words, failed, tried. Again, "You were incredible up there. Thank you." Silence stretched between them, filling with everything unsaid. "I didn't know you'd be here," Jackson managed. "Why would you?" "Fair point. I'm glad I came anyway. Are you?" Not a question, a challenge. Jackson's carefully constructed composure cracked. "I've thought about you every day for the past few years." "That sounds exhausting for you," Jennifer said flatly. "It is." "Good." The word hit him like a slap. Deserved, but painful. "Jennifer, A commotion near the entrance interrupted them. A child's voice, high and distressed, calling for someone. The sound cut through the cocktail chatter like a knife. Jennifer's entire demeanor changed instantly. "Amber." She moved toward the sound, Jackson forgotten. He followed automatically, confused, trying to understand what was happening. A little girl stood near the doorway, tears streaming down her face, looking frantically around the crowded room. She wore a yellow dress, and her hair was pulled into two messy ponytails that were coming undone. She couldn't have been more than 3 years old. "Mama!" the girl cried, voice breaking with genuine distress. "I'm here, baby, I'm here," Jennifer said, swooping down and gathering the child into her arms with practiced ease. "What happened?" "Where's the caretaker?" A flustered young woman hurried over, apologetic. "I'm so sorry. She just bolted when I was helping another child. The childcare room is right by this entrance, and she must have heard the noise, and she's fast. I tried to catch her." "It's okay," Jennifer said, though her tone suggested it very much wasn't. She turned her attention fully to the child. "Amber, sweetheart, you can't run off like that. You scared Mama." "Wanted you," Amber hiccuped against Jennifer's shoulder, her words simple but clear. "Missed you. I know, baby, but you have to stay where Mama can find you, okay?" Jennifer rocked Amber gently, murmuring comfort, completely focused on calming her daughter. The noise of the reception faded into background static. Jackson stood frozen 3 feet away, watching the scene unfold, his brain struggling to process what his eyes were seeing. The child, the little girl in Jennifer's arms, dark curls, fair skin, and when she finally turned her tear-streaked face away from Jennifer's shoulder, wiping her eyes with small fists, Jackson saw his own eyes staring back at him. His champagne glass slipped from his hand, hitting the floor with a crash that made several people turn and stare. But Jackson didn't notice. Couldn't notice. Because the world had just tilted sideways and he couldn't find his balance. That was his child, his daughter. Jennifer had had a child, and she was his. The math was simple, brutal, undeniable. The timing, the features, the way the little girl's expression shifted from distress to curiosity. It was all there, written in genetics and time. Jennifer looked up, saw Jackson's face, saw the recognition blooming there, and her expression hardened instantly. "No," Jennifer said quietly, fierce. "Don't." But Jackson couldn't stop staring, couldn't breathe, couldn't process anything except the overwhelming reality crashing over him in waves. He had a daughter, and he'd missed everything. Chapter 6. Recognition Error. Mathematics is absolute. DNA is absolute. The rest is just terror. Jennifer heard the glass shatter, looked up, and saw Jackson staring at Amber with an expression she'd never seen on his face before. Shock mixed with something that looked like grief, mixed with something else entirely. "No," Jennifer said quietly, fierce. "Don't." But Jackson wasn't listening. He moved closer, his eyes locked on Amber's face with an intensity that made Jennifer's protective instincts flare, hot and sharp. Amber, sensing the attention, looked at the strange man approaching them. Her tears had stopped, replaced by curiosity tinged with wariness. She pressed closer to Jennifer but didn't hide her face. "Jennifer," Jackson's voice came out hoarse, barely above a whisper. "How old is she?" "That's none of your business." "How old?" Jennifer's jaw clenched. Around them, people were starting to notice the tension. The dropped glass, the way Peter Williams was moving quickly through the crowd toward them. "She's mine," Jennifer said, her voice low and dangerous. "That's all you need to know." But Jackson's gaze had already done the math, was already counting backward from the moment Jennifer walked out of his office to the child in her arms whose eyes were identical to his own. "She's mine too," he said, the realization crashing over him in waves. "Jennifer, she's my daughter," Jennifer interrupted, clutching Amber tighter. "My daughter," Amber squirmed, uncomfortable with the tension. "Mama?" Her voice was small, uncertain. "It's okay, baby. We're leaving." Jennifer turned toward the exit, but Jackson reached out, touched her shoulder, gentle, desperate. Jennifer flinched away so violently that several people gasped. "Don't touch me," she hissed. Peter arrived then, immediately inserting himself between Jackson and Jennifer. "I think you should step back." "I need to talk to her," Jackson said, not moving his eyes from Jennifer's face. "She's made it clear she doesn't want to talk to you." "Peter, you heard her." Peter's voice was calm but immovable. "Step back." Jackson finally looked at Peter, and something in his expression must have shown the depths of his desperation, because Peter's face softened slightly, with what might have been pity. "Please," Jackson said, the word cracking. "Please, just let me—" "The answer is no," Jennifer said from behind Peter. "Whatever you think you're entitled to, you're not. You made your choice years ago." "I didn't know. You didn't want to know." Jennifer's voice rose enough that people nearby stopped pretending not to watch. "You made it very clear that I was nothing to you. That what we shared meant nothing. That I meant nothing. That's not true. It's exactly true." Tears were streaming down Jennifer's face now, and Amber was starting to cry again, frightened by her mother's distress. "You looked at me the morning after the most honest night of my life and told me I was just someone who worked in your building. So forgive me if I decided to protect my daughter from ever hearing those words." The words hit Jackson like physical blows. Around them, the reception had gone silent, everyone openly watching now. "Jennifer, please," Jackson's voice broke completely. "Please, you need nothing from me." Jennifer adjusted her grip on Amber, who had her face buried in her mother's neck, crying softly. "You gave up any right to need anything from me the moment you made me feel worthless." She pushed past Peter, heading for the exit. Jackson stood frozen for a half-second before his body moved without permission, following her into the corridor outside the reception hall. "Jennifer, wait!" She didn't stop, just walked faster, heading toward the parking area. Amber's cries had subsided to hiccups, but she kept her face hidden against Jennifer's shoulder. Jackson ran to catch up, his dress shoes slapping against marble floors. "Please, just let me explain." "Explain what?" Jennifer whirled on him, and the fury in her face was terrifying. "Explain how you're suddenly interested in being a father now that you've seen her. Explain how you're going to make up for years of her life that you missed. Explain how I'm supposed to trust you with the most precious thing in my world when you couldn't even trust yourself to be honest with me. I was scared. I don't care." Jennifer shouted, and Amber wailed harder. Jennifer immediately softened her voice, bouncing Amber gently. "Shh, baby, it's okay. Mama's okay." But Jennifer wasn't okay. Her hands were shaking, her breathing was ragged, and tears kept streaming down her face despite her attempts to wipe them away. "Everyone is scared, Jackson," she said, quieter now, but no less fierce. "Everyone who loves someone is scared. That's not an excuse. That's just being human. And you chose your fear over me, over us." "I know," Jackson said, and his own tears started then, hot and humiliating. I know I did, and I've regretted it every single day since. Regret doesn't raise a child, Jennifer said. Regret doesn't wake up at 3 in the morning with a screaming infant. Regret doesn't change diapers or sing lullabies or teach her to be brave when the world is scary. I did that alone. Jackson felt his knees weaken. He leaned against the wall for support. Tell me how to fix this. You can't. There has to be. There doesn't. Jennifer's voice was gentle now, which somehow made it worse. Some things can't be fixed, Jackson. Some mistakes are permanent. She started walking again. Jackson followed a few steps behind, his entire body shaking. They reached her car in the parking structure. Peter was already there, having taken a different route. And he had the driver's side door open for Jennifer. I'll follow you back to the hotel, Peter said quietly. Jennifer nodded, too exhausted to speak. She was buckling Amber into the car seat when Jackson appeared beside the car, his reflection ghostly in the window. Jennifer, he said one more time. Jennifer, please. I know I don't deserve anything. I know I destroyed what we had. But she... His voice cracked again. She's my daughter too. Jennifer closed the car door, making sure Amber was secure. Then she turned to face Jackson fully. Biologically? Yes, in every other way that matters. No, that's not fair. Fair? Jennifer laughed, sharp and bitter. You want to talk about fair? Is it fair that I spent 9 months growing a human alone? Is it fair that I gave birth alone, scared out of my mind, with no one to hold my hand? Is it fair that every single milestone, her first smile, her first word, her first step, I experienced alone because you made it clear I wasn't worth the risk? Each word landed like a hammer blow. Jackson couldn't speak, couldn't breathe, couldn't do anything but stand there and absorb the magnitude of what he'd done. I wanted to tell you, Jennifer said, and now she was crying again, harder. God, Jackson, I wanted to tell you so badly. I had the phone in my hand 100 times. But every time I started to dial, I remembered the look on your face when I told you what I wanted. The disgust, the contempt, and I couldn't risk you looking at her that way. I wouldn't have. Yes, you would have. Jennifer's voice was certain. Maybe not intentionally. Maybe not obviously. But she would have felt it. Children always do. They know when they're not wanted. Jackson sank to his knees on the concrete parking garage floor, no longer able to hold himself up. Tears streamed freely down his face and he didn't try to stop them. I wanted her, he choked out. If I'd known I would have. You would have what? Jennifer asked, looking down at him. Tried to buy your way into her life? Hired lawyers? Fought me for custody? Used your money and power to take her from me? Because you suddenly decided she was worth having? No! Jackson said desperately. No, I would have tried to be better for her. For you. Jennifer crouched down so they were eye level. But you didn't try to be better for yourself. And that's the problem, Jackson. You only want to change because you got caught, not because you realized what you did was wrong. The truth of it silenced him. Jennifer stood, wiped her eyes, straightened her shoulders. I'm going to go now. I'm going to take my daughter back to our hotel room. And I'm going to hold her while she falls asleep, and tomorrow I'm going to take her home to our life. And you're going to stay out of it. Jennifer, please. Goodbye, Jackson. She got in the car, started the engine. Jackson remained on his knees in the parking garage, watching her taillights disappear up the ramp and into the night. Peter Williams stood a few feet away, his expression unreadable. She's right, you know, Peter said quietly. About all of it. Jackson couldn't respond. Could barely breathe through the sobs wrecking his chest. But I've also never seen anyone as destroyed as you look right now, Peter continued. So maybe there's hope for you yet, maybe. He got in his own car and drove away, leaving Jackson alone on the cold concrete floor, surrounded by the wreckage of his own making. Jackson stayed there until his tears ran out, until his knees ached from the hard floor, until security found him and asked if he needed medical attention. No, Jackson managed. I'm fine. But he wasn't fine. He would never be fine again, because he'd just seen his daughter for the first time, and she'd looked at him like he was a stranger, which was exactly what he was. Chapter 7. System Failure. Begging looks the same in every language. Undignified, desperate, and too late. Jackson didn't go to his hotel, didn't go to the bar, didn't call anyone or do anything except sit in his car in that parking garage, staring at nothing, until his phone died and the parking attendant knocked on his window to tell him they were closing. He drove, no destination in mind, just drove through unfamiliar streets in an unfamiliar city, watching other people's lives through lit windows, families eating dinner, children being put to bed, the mundane rituals of normalcy he'd never be part of. His hotel room was sterile, anonymous. Jackson stood at the window overlooking the city, watching traffic lights change colors far below, and wondered if this was all his life would ever be. Empty rooms and hollow victories, and the ghost of what he could have had if he'd been braver. The next several days blurred together. Jackson flew home, went through the motions of existing, functioned enough that people didn't ask questions. But inside, he was collapsing. He tried calling Jennifer. She didn't answer. Sent texts that went unread. Emails that disappeared into the void. Finally, desperate, he reached out through the only connection they had left, Peter Williams. "She doesn't want to talk to you," Al Peter said when he finally returned Jackson's call 3 days later. "I know, but I need to try." "Why? So you can feel better about yourself?" "No," Jackson said honestly, "because I need to know if there's any chance, any possibility that she'll let me try to make this right." Peter was silent for a long moment. "You really hurt her, you know, not just walked away, destroyed her. I know. And now you want access to the child she raised alone, because you suddenly realized what you lost. It's not that simple." "Actually, it is exactly that simple." Peter's voice was firm but not unkind. "From where I'm sitting, you're a selfish man, having a crisis of conscience who wants absolution. And Jennifer doesn't owe you that." "You're right," Jackson said. "She doesn't owe me anything. But she's not the only one involved here anymore. There's a child who deserves to know where she came from. That's a convenient argument. It's also true." Another long silence. "Then I'll ask her. But if she says no, you need to respect that. No lawyers, no power plays, no using your money to force your way in. Understood?" "Understood." 3 days later, Jackson received a text from an unknown number. Saturday, 10 in the morning, Brighton Park, near the fountain. "Come alone. Don't make me regret this." Jackson stared at the message for 5 minutes before responding. "I'll be there." "Thank you." No response came. Saturday morning arrived cold and bright. Jackson was at the park by 9, sitting in his car, watching families arrive. Children on swings, couples walking dogs, the normal rhythm of weekend life that he'd never been part of. At 9:55, Jennifer's car pulled into the lot. Jackson's heart hammered against his ribs. He watched as Jennifer got out, opened the back door, helped Amber out of her car seat. The little girl was wearing pink sneakers and had her hair in braids. She held Jennifer's hand as they walked toward the playground. Jackson waited until they were settled on a bench before approaching, moving slowly, like he was trying not to spook a wild animal. Jennifer saw him coming. Her expression was guarded, exhausted, but not actively hostile. "Progress, maybe." "Thank you for coming," Jackson said, stopping several feet away. "I'm not doing this for you," Jennifer replied. "I'm doing this because I had to explain to Amber why a strange man made Mama cry, and she deserves better than my anger." Jackson nodded, throat too tight to speak. Amber peeked around Jennifer's arm, studying Jackson with the same intense focus she'd had at the reception. Jackson crouched down to her level, keeping his distance. "Hi, Amber," he said softly. "I'm Jackson." Amber didn't respond, just stared at him with those two familiar eyes. Jackson looked at Jennifer, silently asking permission. She gave the smallest nod. "I'm your father, your daddy, but your mama raised you, and she's the important one. I wanted to meet you." "Why?" Amber asked, her voice high and clear but her sentence structure simple. The question gutted him. Because I made a mistake. A big one. And I'm trying to fix it. Mama say sorry when mistake, Amber said seriously, her grammar slightly off in the way of very young children. Your mama is very smart. Amber nodded solemnly, then returned to examining him. After a moment she asked, You like playground? Jackson blinked, caught off guard by the shift. I don't know. I haven't been to one in a very long time. Come see, Amber decided, tugging Jennifer's hand. Swings and slide. Jennifer looked at Jackson, her expression unreadable. You can stay for a little while, but if she gets uncomfortable, you leave. Understood? Understood. They walked to the playground in silence, Amber between them, occasionally glancing up at Jackson with curiosity rather than fear. It was something. It wasn't enough, but it was something. Amber ran ahead to the swings, calling back, Mama, push! Jennifer followed, leaving Jackson standing awkwardly on the wood chips. He watched as Jennifer pushed Amber, the little girl's laughter bright and pure. After a while, Amber jumped off and ran to the slide, then to the monkey bars, then to a complicated climbing structure that made Jackson's chest tighten with worry. She's fearless, he said quietly, moving to stand beside Jennifer. She gets that from me, Jennifer replied, not looking at him. They stood in silence for several minutes, watching Amber play. I'm sorry, Jackson finally said. I know it doesn't fix anything, but I need you to know I'm sorry. For everything. For the way I spoke to you. For not being brave enough to see what you were offering. For missing all of this. Jennifer's jaw tightened. What do you want from me, Jackson? Nothing. I don't want anything from you. I just want... He struggled to find words that weren't selfish. I want to know if there's any possibility that you'd let me try to be part of her life. Not as someone who swoops in and disrupts everything, just as someone who shows up, consistently, who tries. Why? Jennifer turned to face him. Why now? Why does it matter now when it didn't matter then? Because I was living wrong, Jackson said simply. I built this entire life around protecting myself from getting hurt, and all I did was make myself into someone who hurts people. And I can't, his voice broke, I can't keep being that person. Not anymore. That's not about Amber, Jennifer said. That's about you wanting to feel better about yourself. You're right. It is. But it's also about her. Because she deserves to know where she comes from. And maybe... Jackson had to pause, collect himself. Maybe she deserves a father who's trying to be better, even if he's starting from nothing. Jennifer looked at him for a long moment. You broke me, Jackson. I know. You made me feel like I was crazy for wanting something real. Like I was asking for too much. Like I wasn't worth the risk. You were worth everything, Jackson said, tears streaming down his face now. You were worth everything, and I was too broken to see it. Were? Jennifer asked. Past tense? Ah, Jackson corrected. You are worth everything. Jennifer's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't let them fall. I don't trust you. I understand. And I'm not sure I can ever forgive you. I understand that too. But Amber... Jennifer looked at her daughter, who was now trying to convince another child to help her build something in the sandbox. Amber deserves better than my unresolved issues with you. So what does that mean? Jackson asked carefully. Jennifer took a deep breath, let it out slowly. It means you can try. Just try. Show up. Be consistent. Don't make promises you can't keep. Don't buy her affection. Just be here regularly and we'll see. Thank you, Jackson whispered. Don't thank me yet. I'm watching you. Every second. And the moment you make her feel like she's not wanted, like she's not enough, like she's anything less than the most important thing in your world, I will end this permanently. Understood. Understood. And Jackson? Jennifer's voice softened slightly. This isn't about me giving you another chance. This is about me giving her the opportunity to know you. Don't confuse the two. I won't. Amber came running over, her hands covered in sand. Mama, thirsty. Okay, baby, water. Jennifer pulled a sippy cup from her bag, handed it to Amber. Amber drank, studying Jackson over the rim of her cup. Then she held it out to him. Want some? The simple gesture, a child's instinct to share, broke something in Jackson. He carefully accepted the cup, took a small sip, handed it back. Thank you. Amber smiled just slightly, then ran back to play. Jennifer turned to Jackson. Same time next week. Don't be late. I won't. As Jennifer gathered their things to leave, Amber looked back over her shoulder and waved at Jackson. Just a small wave, nothing dramatic. Jackson waved back, and the moment Amber turned away, he sat heavily on the bench. An elderly woman sitting nearby asked gently, "Are you all right?" Jackson looked up, tried to compose himself, failed completely. I just met my daughter for the first time. She's almost 3 years old. The woman's expression softened with understanding. Better late than never, I suppose. Jackson wasn't sure about that. But he knew he was going to spend however long it took trying to prove that Jennifer hadn't made a mistake in giving him this chance. Even if it meant showing up every week for the rest of his life. Even if Amber never called him Dad. Even if Jennifer never forgave him. He'd show up anyway, because that's what you did when you loved someone. You showed up. Chapter 8. Confession. Without variables, the truth, when it finally comes, doesn't set you free. It just shows you the size of your cage. Jackson showed up the following Saturday, and the Saturday after that, and every scheduled time Jennifer allowed, approaching each visit like it was a gift he hadn't earned, but was grateful to receive anyway. Amber, for her part, warmed to him gradually, not with the eager trust of a child who'd never been disappointed, but with the cautious curiosity of someone deciding whether this new person was safe. "What color?" she asked during their third visit, sitting beside him at a picnic table while Jennifer watched from nearby. At nearly 3, her sentences were getting longer but still simple, direct. "What color do I like?" Jackson clarified, and she nodded. "Blue. What's yours?" "Purple. Pink. Yellow too. Those are good choices. All pretty colors. Mama say can like lots," Amber explained seriously, her grammar improving but still endearingly imperfect. "Like ice cream and vegetables. Your mama is very wise." Amber nodded in agreement, then went back to the coloring book she'd brought. Jackson watched her work, noticing how she held the crayon wrong, but colored with fierce determination, her tongue peeking out slightly as she concentrated. Jennifer approached with coffee for herself and juice for Amber. She set them down without speaking, then sat at the opposite end of the table, creating physical distance that spoke volumes. "Thank you," Jackson said quietly. Jennifer didn't respond, just watched Amber color, her expression carefully neutral. The silence wasn't comfortable, but it wasn't hostile either. It was the silence of two people trying to exist in the same space without destroying each other, learning to breathe the same air without choking on old wounds. Weeks became months. Jackson learned Amber's rhythms, that she was cranky before lunch, energetic after naps, thoughtful when tired. He learned that she loved books about animals, but was scared of bees. That she sang made-up songs while she played and asked approximately 7 million questions per hour. He learned to be patient, to let her come to him rather than overwhelming her, to accept that some days she wanted his attention and some days she didn't, and neither meant he was failing. Jennifer kept the boundaries firm. He wasn't Dad or Daddy. He was Jackson. He came when invited, left when asked, never pushed for more than she was willing to give. But one evening, after Amber had fallen asleep during a movie at Jennifer's apartment, a huge step being allowed inside her home, Jennifer made coffee and gestured for Jackson to join her on the small balcony. The city lights twinkled below them, and the night air was cool enough to need a sweater. Jennifer wrapped hers tighter around herself, leaning against the railing. "Why are you really doing this?" she asked once they were settled, her voice carrying the weight of months of observation. "Because she deserves it," Jackson said immediately. "That's the right answer. But it's not the whole answer." Jackson stared at his coffee cup, choosing his words carefully. Because the biggest mistake of my life wasn't what I said that morning. It was building a life where love was a weakness, where caring about someone meant giving them power to hurt you. And I don't want to die that person. People don't change, Jennifer said, but her tone suggested she wanted to be proven wrong. Maybe not completely, Jackson admitted, but they can get better. They can recognize their damage and work to stop spreading it to everyone around them. And you think you're doing that? I think I'm trying. Jennifer studied him in the dim light, her expression unreadable. You can't undo the years you missed. I know. You can't buy forgiveness with consistency. I know. And I may never trust you with my heart again. Jackson met her eyes. I know, but maybe you can trust me with hers. The words hung between them, weighted with possibility and doubt in equal measure. You hurt me worse than anyone ever has, Jennifer said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. You made me doubt myself, made me feel like wanting love was a character flaw, made me feel disposable. I'm sorry, Jackson said, and the inadequacy of the words burned in his throat. I'm so sorry, Jennifer. Not because I got caught or because I want something from you now, but because what I did was unforgivable and you deserved so much better. A tear rolled down Jennifer's cheek. She wiped it away angrily like it had betrayed her. I don't want to cry over you anymore. Then don't be angry instead. Anger is cleaner. I'm tired of being angry, Jennifer said, her shoulders sagging slightly. It's exhausting. And it's not good for Amber. She can feel it even when I try to hide it. What would be good for Amber? Jennifer looked through the sliding glass door at her sleeping daughter, curled up under a blanket on the couch, completely innocent, completely trusting. I think she needs to know she's loved completely. By me always. And maybe by you too, if you can prove you mean it. How do I prove that? Time, Jennifer said simply. Just time. Keep showing up. Keep being consistent. Keep choosing her even when it's inconvenient. What if I mess up? You will mess up. Everyone does. The question is whether you show up anyway after you mess up or whether you disappear again. Jackson nodded, understanding the test. I won't disappear. We'll see. They sat in silence for a while, drinking coffee that had gone lukewarm, watching the city breathe below them. A siren wailed in the distance. A couple walked by on the sidewalk, laughing about something, life continuing around them while they sat suspended in this fragile moment. Can I ask you something? Jackson said eventually. Maybe. Are you happy with your life? With how things turned out? Jennifer considered the question carefully, tilting her head as she thought. I'm content. I have work I'm proud of, a daughter I adore, friends who show up when I need them. That's more than a lot of people get. But are you happy? Happiness is overrated, Jennifer said with a small, sad smile. I'm satisfied. That's better. More stable. Less dependent on circumstances I can't control. Is Peter? Jackson couldn't finish the question, couldn't bring himself to ask if she'd found what she deserved with someone else. Peter is a friend. A good friend. One of the best I've ever had. But that's all. She paused, then added quietly, he asked once, about a year ago, if I wanted to try being more. Jackson's chest tightened. What did you say? I said I wasn't ready. That I might never be ready. And he said that was okay, that he'd rather have my friendship than lose me by pushing for more. He's a good man. He is. Jennifer turned to face Jackson directly, which is why I know the difference now. Between someone who actually cares and someone who just wants to own things. The words stung, but Jackson didn't flinch from them. I deserved that. Yes, you did. Another silence, this one heavier. Why would it matter to you anyway? Jennifer asked. About Peter? Jackson looked at her, really looked at her, and decided that after everything he owed her honesty. Complete, vulnerable honesty. Because he stopped himself, searching for courage. Still what? Still in love with you, he said, each word feeling like jumping off a cliff. I never stopped. I just learned to live with the pain of it. Learned to carry it like a stone in my chest that never gets lighter. Jennifer's breath caught audibly. Jackson, I'm not saying that to manipulate you. Jackson said quickly, his hands trembling slightly. "I'm not asking for anything. I just thought you should know the truth. After all the lies I told myself and you, the least I can do is be honest now. Even if it doesn't change anything." Jennifer stood abruptly, went to the railing, gripped it with both hands hard enough that her knuckles went white. "You don't get to do that." "Do what?" Say things like that. Act like your feelings matter more than your actions. Act like loving me from a distance makes up for destroying me up close. I know my actions were terrible. I'm not excusing them. Then why tell me you love me?" Jennifer's voice was strained, cracking at the edges. "What am I supposed to do with that information? What possible good does it do either of us?" "Nothing," Jackson said, standing but keeping his distance. "You don't have to do anything with it. I just needed you to know that what we had, what I threw away, it wasn't nothing to me. It meant everything. I just didn't understand that until it was too late." Jennifer turned to face him, tears streaming freely now, her careful composure completely shattered. "It's still too late, Jackson. You don't get to come back and make this okay just because you finally figured out what you lost. I know. So why are you telling me this?" Her voice broke on the last word. "Because lying to you broke us. And I'm done lying to anyone, especially myself. I love you. I loved you then, and I love you now, and I'll probably love you until I die. But that doesn't mean you owe me anything. It just means I finally understand what I destroyed." They stood on that small balcony, two broken people trying to figure out if the pieces could ever fit together again, knowing they probably couldn't. Hoping anyway, despite all evidence to the contrary. "I should go," Jackson said finally, his voice rough. "It's late, and I've said too much." "Yeah." He moved toward the door, paused with his hand on the handle. "Thank you for letting me try, for giving Amber the chance to know me. You didn't have to do that." "No," Jennifer agreed, wiping her face with the back of her hand. "I didn't." Jackson let himself out quietly, pulling the door closed with careful precision. Jennifer stood on the balcony long after his car disappeared down the street, crying for everything that was and wasn't and might never be. Inside, Amber stirred, mumbled, "Mama?" in her sleep, her voice small and trusting. Jennifer wiped her eyes hastily, went inside, gathered her daughter into her arms. "I'm here, baby. Always here." Because whatever happened with Jackson, whatever complicated feelings remained tangled between them like barbed wire. This was the truth that mattered. Amber was loved completely, without conditions, without reservations, and that was something no amount of regret could take away. That was the foundation Jennifer had built, solid and unshakable, and nothing, not Jackson's confession, not her own confused feelings, not the ghost of what might have been, could undermine it. She held Amber close and promised herself that whatever she decided about Jackson, it would be based on what was best for their daughter, not on her own wounded heart, not on his pretty words. On what Amber needed, what Amber deserved. Everything else was just noise. Chapter 9. First Contact Protocol. Meeting your child for the first time when she's already toddling around feels like joining a story after all the important chapters. Jackson arrived at the park 15 minutes early, as he always did now, and watched from his car as Jennifer and Amber played. Amber had grown in the months since he'd first met her. Still small but sturdier somehow, more confident. She ran without the wobbling uncertainty of early toddlerhood, spoke in fuller sentences that sometimes surprised him with their logic. He'd missed so much. Every day that realization hit him fresh, a wound that never quite healed. Jennifer spotted his car and waved him over. Amber was on the swings, pumping her legs with fierce concentration, her face screwed up in determination. "She learned to swing by herself," Jennifer said as Jackson approached. Pride and sadness mixed in her voice, the bittersweet acknowledgement of a milestone he hadn't witnessed. "That's amazing," Jackson said, meaning it with every fiber of his being. "Look, Jackson," Amber called from the swing, her voice bright. "Look how high." "I see you." Jackson called back, his chest tight with emotion. "You're doing great." Amber beamed, pumping harder, going higher, fearless in the way only children could be. This had become their rhythm, Jennifer orchestrating, Amber exploring, Jackson watching from the sidelines of a life he had no real place in. But at least he was there. At least he was trying. "Can I talk to you about something?" Jennifer asked, her tone serious enough to make Jackson's stomach drop. "Of course." "Not here. Let's walk." They moved to a bench within sight of the playground, but far enough away for private conversation. Jennifer sat, hands folded in her lap, choosing her words with obvious care. "Amber asked me something yesterday," Jennifer began, not looking at Jackson. "She wanted to know why you leave after every visit." Jackson's throat tightened painfully. "What did you tell her?" That you have other things to take care of." "But she's smart, Jackson. She's starting to notice patterns. To ask questions I don't know how to answer." "What kind of questions?" Why you're not around like Peter is. Why you come and go instead of staying. Why she doesn't call you what other kids call their fathers." Jennifer finally looked at him. She's comparing, processing, trying to understand why her family looks different. Each question landed like a punch to Jackson's solar plexus. "What do you want me to do?" "I don't know," Jennifer admitted, and the vulnerability in her voice surprised him. "I'm not trying to keep you from her anymore. That's not what this is. I'm trying to figure out how to make this work in a way that doesn't confuse her or set her up for disappointment." "You think I'll disappoint her?" "I think people disappoint each other all the time, even when they're trying not to." Jennifer's expression was troubled. "And I need to know if you're in this for real, Jackson. Not just showing up when it's convenient, but actually in this. Because if you're not, it's better for her if we stop now before she gets more attached." "I'm in this," Jackson said immediately, with zero hesitation. "Whatever that means, however you'll let me be, I'm in this completely." Jennifer searched his face, looking for cracks, for doubt, for any sign that this was temporary. She's going to need more eventually. More time, more consistency, more presence. Are you ready for that? Yes. Even when it's hard? Even when it interferes with your work? Even when she's difficult or moody or doesn't want you around? Yes, Jackson said firmly, leaning forward. I've already lost years. I'm not losing anything else. Whatever she needs, whatever you'll allow, I'm here. Jennifer nodded slowly, something like relief crossing her features. Okay, then we try this. You come twice a week instead of once. You can come to her dance class on Wednesday afternoons. She just started, and she loves it. And Saturday mornings remain our time at the park. Really? Hope bloomed in Jackson's chest, fragile and terrifying. But Jackson, Jennifer's voice turned serious, almost hard. If you commit to this and then back out, that's it. No more chances. She needs to know she can count on you, can she? Jackson thought about his calendar, packed with meetings and obligations that suddenly felt utterly pointless. She can count on me. I'll make sure of it. Prove it. Over the following weeks, Jackson restructured his entire life around Amber's schedule, moved meetings to early mornings or late evenings, delegated responsibilities he'd once insisted only he could handle, said no to things he'd once considered unmissable. His colleagues noticed. You're different, his assistant commented one afternoon. More present somehow, less distracted. I have better priorities now, Jackson said simply, checking his watch to make sure he wouldn't be late for Amber's dance class. Wednesday afternoons became sacred. He'd sit in a small studio with other parents, mostly mothers who eyed him with curiosity and occasional suspicion, watching. Amber and a dozen other toddlers approximate ballet moves with varying degrees of success. Amber wasn't particularly graceful, but she committed fully to every movement, her face screwed up in concentration, her tongue poking out slightly when she tried something difficult. She fell often, but she always got back up, determined. After class, she'd run to show him what she'd learned, her explanations breathless and jumbled. And then we do this, she'd demonstrate wobbling. But I fall, but is okay because everyone fall. And then we... Jackson listened to every word like it was the most important information he'd ever received. Because in a way it was. These were the moments that built a childhood, the small accumulations of attention and care, and he was finally being allowed to witness them. Jennifer watched these interactions with cautious hope. She could see Jackson trying, genuinely trying, not just performing for her benefit. He was learning to be patient, to follow Amber's lead, to accept that relationships with toddlers were built on repetition and small moments rather than grand gestures. One Saturday at the park, something shifted. Amber was playing near the climbing structure when she fell, not badly, but hard enough to scrape her knee and shock her into tears. Jennifer started to move, but Jackson was already there, scooping Amber up before Jennifer could reach her. "I know. Sweetheart," Jackson murmured, holding Amber close as she wailed into his shoulder. "I know it hurts." Amber clung to him, her small body shaking with sobs. Jackson rocked her gently, one hand on her back, the other cradling her head, murmuring soft comfort. Jennifer approached with the first aid kit she always carried, but Jackson had already assessed the wound. Not too bad, just scared her more than anything. He sat on a nearby bench, Amber still in his arms, and cleaned the scrape with gentle efficiency. Amber hiccuped through her tears, watching him work with wide, trusting eyes. "You're being so brave," Jackson told her, applying a bandage decorated with cartoon characters. "The bravest." "Hurts," Amber whispered, her voice small and vulnerable. "I know, baby, but it's going to feel better soon. I promise." Amber studied his face with that intense, evaluating look children had. Then in a voice barely above a whisper, she said, "Don't go yet, Daddy." The world stopped. Jackson's hands froze on the bandage. Jennifer's breath caught audibly. Even the background noise of the park seemed to fade away. Amber, oblivious to the magnitude of what she'd just said, snuggled closer into Jackson's chest, still sniffling but calming. Jackson looked at Jennifer, terrified he'd overstepped, that he'd somehow manipulated this moment, that she'd take Amber away and end everything right here. But Jennifer's eyes were full of tears, and she nodded once, permission, acknowledgement, acceptance. "I'm not going anywhere." "Sweetheart," Jackson managed, his voice wrecked. "Daddy's got you." They stayed like that for several minutes, Jackson holding Amber while Jennifer watched, all three of them processing the weight of that one word. Eventually, Amber's tears dried and she wiggled down, ready to play again, the moment already passing for her in the way things did for small children. "All better," she announced, examining her bandaged knee with satisfaction before running back to the playground. After Amber ran off, Jackson sat frozen on the bench, staring at his hands. "I need a minute," he said to Jennifer, his voice barely steady. "Okay." Jackson stood on shaking legs and walked toward his car. He made it to the parking lot before the sobs hit, collapsing against the driver's side door. Everything he'd missed, her birth, her first sounds, her first steps, her first words, crashed over him in waves. All those moments, gone forever, irretrievable. Years of her life he'd never get back, because he'd been too much of a coward to recognize what mattered. He cried until he had nothing left, until his chest ached, and his eyes burned, and his throat was raw. When he finally composed himself and returned to the playground, Jennifer was pushing Amber on the swings again, the picture of normalcy. But when she looked at him, really looked at him, she saw what had happened. Saw the tear-stained face he'd tried to clean up, the red eyes he couldn't hide. "Are you okay?" she asked quietly while Amber was distracted. "She called me Daddy," Jackson said, his voice barely working. "I know." "I don't deserve that." "Probably not," Jennifer agreed gently, "but she gave it to you anyway. So now you have to earn it. Every single day." "I will," Jackson promised, the words feeling like a vow. "I swear to you, I will." Jennifer studied him for a long moment, her expression softening almost imperceptibly. "I believe you might actually mean that." "I do." "Then keep showing up, Jackson. Keep being the person she thinks you are when she looks at you. That's all any of us can do." As they were leaving the park later, Amber reached for Jackson's hand without prompting. Not dramatically, not as a statement, Just a small gesture of trust that nearly broke him all over again. "See you Wednesday?" Amber asked as they reached Jennifer's car, her pronunciation clear, her meaning clearer. "Absolutely," Jackson confirmed, crouching to her level. "I'll be at dance class." "Okay," Amber smiled, then let Jennifer buckle her into her car seat. Jackson stood in the parking lot long after they drove away, looking at his hand where Amber's smaller one had been, feeling the ghost of her trust like a physical weight. He was somebody's father now. Not just biologically, but in the way that mattered, in the everyday showing up, in the consistency, in the choice to be there even when it was hard. And for the first time in years, Jackson Dean felt like he might be becoming someone worth knowing, someone worth loving, someone worthy of the title. Daddy, Chapter 10, Reconstruction. Redemption isn't a moment, it's the humiliating, beautiful work of showing up when no one's watching. Months cascaded into seasons. Jackson became a fixture in Amber's life. Not perfectly, not without missteps, but consistently. He learned that consistency mattered more than perfection, that showing up tired was better than not showing up at all. He mastered the art of reading the same book 17 times without showing impatience, learned to negotiate with a stubborn toddler about vegetables, became an expert at finding lost stuffed animals with the seriousness of a detective on a critical case. Jennifer watched this transformation with guarded amazement. The man who'd once measured everything in terms of profit and loss was learning to measure life in crayon drawings and bedtime giggles. "She made me this," Jackson said one Wednesday, showing Jennifer a picture Amber had drawn. It was mostly scribbles, but allegedly featured Jackson and Amber at the park. "That's you?" Jennifer asked, pointing at the blue blob. "She said so." Jennifer smiled despite herself. "It's perfect." "It really is," Jackson said, and he meant it with his whole heart. The boundaries between them remained, but they'd softened like old scars, still visible but less painful. Jennifer still didn't trust him with her heart, but she was beginning to trust him with their daughter. One evening, after a particularly long day, where Amber had been cranky and difficult, Jackson sat exhausted on Jennifer's couch while Amber finally, mercifully fell asleep. "This is harder than running a company," Jackson said, only half joking. "Welcome to parenting," Jennifer replied, handing him tea. "It's the most important job you'll ever have, and you're terrible at it 90% of the time." That's comforting. It's honest. They sat in comfortable silence, something that would have been impossible months ago. "Do you think you'll ever forgive me?" Jackson asked quietly. "Not now, but eventually." Jennifer considered this carefully. "I don't know. Some days I think maybe. Some days I remember how deeply you hurt me, and I can't imagine it." "That's fair." "But Jackson," Jennifer met his eyes, "forgiveness isn't the goal here. Being a good father to Amber is. Don't confuse the two. I'm not. I just wanted you to know that I understand what I destroyed. Not just with you and me, but inside myself. And I'm trying to rebuild it into something better. That's what matters." Seasons shifted. Jackson showed up for dance recitals and doctor's appointments. Learned to braid hair badly, but Amber wore his attempts with pride. Kept spare clothes at his apartment for impromptu sleepovers that Jennifer allowed with increasing frequency. Peter remained part of their lives, having become Amber's honorary uncle. He and Jackson had developed a wary respect, bonded by their shared affection for the two people who'd somehow become a family. One Saturday, Peter joined them at the park. Watching Jackson chase Amber around the playground, he said quietly to Jennifer, "He's really changed." "Has he?" Jennifer asked, still cautious. "You don't see it because you're too close, but yes, he's become someone real." Jennifer watched Jackson and Amber considering this. Maybe Peter was right. Maybe people could change, could grow, could become better versions of themselves, if they wanted it badly enough. That evening, during bath time, Amber asked a question that stopped everyone. "Why Daddy not live with us?" Jennifer's hands stilled in Amber's hair. Jackson, supervising from the doorway, felt his heart stop. "Because Mama and Daddy aren't married." "Sweet pea," Jennifer said gently. Oh. Amber played with her bath toys, then asked with perfect toddler logic, Can get married? It's more complicated than that, baby. Why? Because grown-up relationships are complicated. Amber accepted this with a shrug and went back to her toys. But the question lingered in the air long after bath time ended. Later, standing in Jennifer's kitchen, Jackson brought it up. I wouldn't pressure you. I know, Jennifer interrupted. But you can't fix the past by rushing the future. I'm not trying to rush anything. I'm just hoping I'll wake up one day and decide to give you another chance. Jackson looked at her, really looked at her. Yes, that's exactly what I'm hoping for. That's not fair to me, Jennifer said, but her voice was gentle. I'm still healing. I know. I'm sorry. Stop apologizing and just be present. That's all I'm asking. Okay. They stood in the kitchen, surrounded by evidence of the life Jennifer had built. Amber's drawings on the refrigerator, her toys in a basket by the couch, her laughter still echoing in the walls. Jackson wasn't part of this life yet. Not really. But he was present in it, orbiting its edges, hoping one day Jennifer would let him come in from the cold. Months later, during Amber's 3rd birthday party, a celebration at the park with a few friends, Jackson watched his daughter blow out candles and make a wish. Jennifer stood beside him, and for the first time in years, they were just two parents celebrating their child. Not enemies, not lovers. Just parents. What do you think she wished for? Jackson asked quietly. Probably a pony, Jennifer said, almost smiling. Realistic. They helped clean up after the party, working together with the practiced ease of people who'd learned to cooperate. As the sun started to set, casting everything in golden light, Amber sat on Jackson's shoulders, pointing at clouds. That one looks like elephant, she announced. I see it, Jackson said, steadying her with gentle hands. Jennifer watched them, her hand unconsciously touching her chest where her heart beat with complicated feelings. Not love, she wasn't ready for that, but something softer than anger, something like hope. Peter appeared beside her. Think you'll forgive him? Jennifer's answer was quiet, honest. I don't know, but I'm letting him earn the chance. Amber laughed at something in the sky, and Jackson laughed with her, the sound carrying across the park. Jennifer watched them, her hand still on her chest, and thought maybe, just maybe, healing didn't mean forgetting. It meant learning to carry the scars while still building something new. They stood there as the sun began to set, casting everything in amber light, the color of hope, the color of their daughter's name. A family not quite whole, not quite healed, but slowly, painfully being built from scratch. And sometimes that kind of imperfect reconstruction was more beautiful than anything that had come before. Sometimes the second chances were harder, but more meaningful than the first ones. Sometimes you had to break completely to rebuild into something stronger. Jackson didn't have Jennifer's forgiveness yet, might never have it. But he had Amber's trust, and he was learning that was its own kind of grace. He had the chance to show up, to be present, to earn his place in this small, fierce family one day at a time. And that was enough. For now, it was enough.